Let's face it, the ending of Scream 7 was real crap. You cannot bring Stu Macher back and treat him so poorly. Hi, I'm Jonathan Soler, and today I'm gonna try to fix the ending of Scream 7. So, by the way, it's going to be huge, a lot of huge spoiler in that video, so if you don't want to be spoiled, please come back later. And I consider that you have seen the movie, so you're gonna roughly know what I'm talking about. So the problem with the ending of Scream 7 is that for the whole movie, they were building up the fact that Stu Macher was back. And we knew that also because in the marketing campaign, it was quite heavily suggested from interviews or from official pages of the movie casting with Matthew Lillard coming back. So we knew that somehow Palpatine, no, Stu Macher would be back. And actually, the way they did it in the movie, up until the end, I thought it was plausible. It was maybe not the most logical way, not maybe the most rational way, but I thought it could somehow make sense. But the ending was extremely frustrating and disappointing because we expected that Stumacher would be part of the killing plan, okay? And as you probably saw in the movie, Stumacher actually is not alive. The psychiatrist made up some stories that Stumacher was still alive and institutionalized in his hospital. We don't know why. He created a fake room for John Doe, aka Stumacher. He even created some AI avatar to make Sidney Prescott believe Stumacher is back. And when you think about it, you think it makes no sense. Why you would try to make people believe Stumacher is back so much if he's not back? It it makes no sense in the story. And I thought, like a lot of people, I read some reviews, negative one and positive ones, and everyone agrees, even people who love the movie like I did, everyone agrees the ending was probably one of the worst in the Scream franchise. So, since with that YouTube channel, what I want to take is that I want to take one movie that I think has at least one major story flaw. I want to point it out, explain why I think it doesn't work, and try to bring some solutions. The the goal with that exercise is to practice myself to find some flaws in stories so that when I write a story, I can spot flaws more easily. And I can also practice to come up with solution more easily. So I'm going to try to do that exercise with the ending and only the ending of the Screen 7. So this is what I would have done, and I think it would have been a better ending. Tell me if you agree or not in the comment. And if you have a better idea or just a different idea, I would be very interested to read it. So please put it in the comment. So when I will do that kind of script doctor exercise, I'm gonna try to be as close as possible to the original screenplay and story and just change a few things that I think would have made it better. So for Screen 7, this is what I would have done. I would have kept the psychiatrist as a killer, but the lady neighbor of Sidney Prescott, I get rid of her. I think she's not interesting. And I think there's a lot of stuff to do with Stumacher would be still alive somehow. So this is what I would have done. For example, in the scene close to the end where Tatum, the daughter of Sidney Prescott, gets attacked, at one point we can see two killers. And what I would have done, maybe before, I would have made her wound one of the killer very badly, for example, in some place that we can see clearly, for example, at the end, and in a way that clearly shows that the killer is wounded, like maybe stabbed through the hand. And then we forget about that. It would be a clue that will be useful later, but we forget about that. Then the same thing, the revelation at the end, I keep the psychiatrist, but not the lady. And instead of the lady, I would put one of the minions from the psychiatrist hospital, like there was before in the movie. They used some guy from some patient from the hospital to use him as a killer. And I think that could have been very interesting if Stu is alive and spent some time in that institution. He could have been a kind of a mastermind, breaking people's mind and turning them into psychotic, for example. It could have been interesting if even though it would not have been shown, but we could have understand that Stu Macher did to the psychiatrist who would take care of him exactly what the Joker did with Harley Quinn in the Batman mythology. So basically, breaking their mind so they become crazy. And so that would explain how the psychiatrist would have become a killer. And at the end of the movie, when we reveal both killers, one of them would be psychiatrist, and the other one would be just a minion. That is not important. Who is that? And here, the audience would be a little bit frustrated because we expected that Stu Macher would be one of the killer. So the purpose would be to play with people's expectations, but not to a point where they would be pissed off like in Scream 7. And I would put some elements before that in the story. For example, we could have at one point where the killer is calling Sidney Prescott, he could talk about Stu Macher in third person so that Sidney could say, so you are not Stu Macher. And then the killer, who at that point on the phone would not be Stu Macher, could say something like, yes, we are, suggesting that there is more than one killer and Stu Macher could be one of them. So it would be a hint so that people would expect Stu Macher to be one of the killer, although in the revelation scene at the end, he would not be there. And maybe at some point also the killer on the phone could say some stuff a little bit weird about Stu Macher, like if he has a huge admiration for him, which could be logical because there are a lot of people who are very admirative. They have a lot of fascination for serial killer. We know that has been documented. So we could have some sense of that the killer right now, the psychiatrist, would have some admiration for Stu Macher being a kind of a cult leader, guru, turning people's mind, so breaking their mind so they become crazy and they start killing people in the ghost face way. And so basically, at the end, people would expect Stu Macher to be the killer, but I would keep the revelation almost exactly as it is in the movie. The psychiatrist revealing his identity as one of the killer, explaining that he treated Stu and he was fascinated by his worldview, his mentality, maybe consider him as a prophet or something like that. And the other one would be, we could expect him to be Stu Macher, and when he puts off his mask, it would just be a minion. And it would be frustrating because we would have built, as the movie did very well, Stu Macher as being one of the killer. So it would be extremely frustrating, but that would not be finished here. So then they fight because after revelation in the Scream movies, they always keep fighting. I would make them put their mask back on because honestly, except in the first Scream, every time they fight after the revelation, when they don't have the mask, the ghost killer, the ghost face killer mask, it feels a little bit weird for me. So I would make them put their mask on, at least the minion. And the minion could fight Sidney and Tatum the way the lady fights Sidney and Tatum in the movie. And if he has the mask, it would be even more interesting for that point. They kill him, and Tatum could say something like, maybe we should put off his mask to make sure it's not Stu. Or she could say something like that. And her mother would be like, no, there's no reason it's Stu, because we saw it was the minion. And the audience at that moment could be like, wait, maybe it's Stu. Like, I don't know for what reason they will explain, but maybe if we put off the mask of the killer, it will be Stu. So you create a little bit of suspense. They put off the mask, it's not Stu, it's still the minion. So it's kind of frustrating. And at that point, people would be like, okay, but I expected Stu to come back somehow. And this is what I would do. That would be the end officially of the movie. And so Sidney Prescott, Tatum, they thought they killed the killers. And they think they could say something like, oh, okay, I knew this was fake. I knew this was AI, as it is suggested in the movie. And then we all think that was the way they brought Stu back. And then I would add another scene at the end. The scene could start with a close-up of the hand with a bandage of some guy. So now people might remember that Tatum stabbed the hand of one killer, for example. And when there was the revelation scene, I would make it not clear, but that the killer can use both hands like they have no problem with their hands. Probably most people would not notice and would not remember, wait, one of the killer was stabbed in the hand. They would probably forget. But at the end, we see a close-up of a hand with a wound or a bandage, and then the camera pans back, and we could see, for example, Stu Macher, he's free, he's outside, or maybe if there could be some kind of interaction with Sidney Prescott, I think it would be even more amazing. Maybe not what I will say, but something like that. For example, we have seen a lot of times that in a movie when you have characters uh, entering the subway, the doors close, and then, for example, she could turn and see Stu Macher outside. So there's no real direct interaction between them. There's no way for her to grab him, stop him, or whatever. But we would know that Sidney Prescott knows that Stu Macher is still alive, and we, as the audience, would probably understand that actually Stu Macher was kind of the mastermind of all these. He was indeed the one planning everything. And I think that would have been a better ending, because the problem with that ending is that we build up to the fact that Stu Macher is the killer in the real Scream 7 movie, and he's not, he was dead. And he's extremely frustrated. The problem is that you cannot have Stu Macher being one of the killer in the revelation scene, because it's too much. It's what people expect, and in Scream movies, they like to play with people's expectation. But the way I suggested, you still play with expectation. At the revelation scene, you reveal that it's not Stu Macher, it's the psychiatrist. It's difficult to say in English. Psychiatrist and one of the minion. And when people think, oh, okay, it was not Stu, it was AI, Stu was dead, Sidney Prescott could say that, you're like, you're just a freak and you use AI to scare me, but Stu is dead. Then another scene with the revelation of Stu being still alive, and even if you don't need to say it, being the mastermind behind everything. And I would probably not make a sequel, because I think with such an ending, it would be nice if you stop here. It would be like a very high point, and you stop here. You don't add some new characters coming back from the past. I think the franchise finishing on a Screen 7 with such an ending would be good enough, for me at least. So that was my take on what could have been a better ending of Screen 7. If you think it was crap, please tell me in the comment, I need to know. And if you have some ideas, better or worse, I would be really interested to read them in the comment. See you in the next video.